Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 17th day of October in the year of our Lord 2025. I will be talking about the peace agreement, or ceasefire if you prefer, orchestrated by President Trump to end the slaughter in Gaza and return the hostages to their families. Yes, it was a glorious day, anticipated for 2 years. And on the day they arrived, 65,000 people gathered in Hostage Square to welcome them home. Many did not survive, but those who did, it was indeed an emotional and glorious day. Imagine the joy of seeing your loved one who survived 2 years of captivity underground in the tunnels of Gaza for 2 years. You didn't know whether he was alive or dead, what suffering he might be enduring. The peace might not hold. It might not be anything other than just a temporary pause in the slaughter, but the hostages are home. And for that moment, at least that moment, it was glorious. Everybody around the world celebrated, called Donald Trump a hero. When Trump spoke to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, one of the speakers referred to him as a giant of Jewish history. Everybody celebrated except, of course, the ceasefire protesters here in America. It seems that what they had been screaming about for 2 years was somehow not enough for them. I suspect that they see their own only policy, which is Trump is bad, slipping away. That's slipping away. If they had no policy at all, that would be good, because the more policies your politicians have, the poorer you are. No policy is usually the best policy. Can't you just yourself be happy? Just be happy for one moment. Because these hostages are free for more than 730 days since October 7, 2023, when Hamas kidnapped about 250 people from Israel. They endured a terrible ordeal. Finally, about 20 of them were released. In total, 120 made it home alive. 130 did not survive the ordeal. The scene of their return reminded me of the films about when the survivors of the Holocaust stepped off the trains and entered freedom. These dates, the dates of the start of the war and the end, carry significance in the Jewish calendar. But I don't pretend to understand all that. I wonder if Hamas understands it. For the hostages, after years of captivity, starvation, physical abuse, torture, hidden away in oxygen-deprived tunnels, their conditions reminiscent of those described by the psalmist in Psalm 107, verses 10 through 14. Quote, "Some sat in darkness, in utter darkness, prisoners, suffering in iron chains because they rebelled against God's commands and despised the plans of the Most High, so he subjected them to bitter labor. They stumbled, there was no one to help. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from the distress. He brought them out of darkness and the utter darkness, and he broke away their chains," end quote. So, there is or was peace, if only for a moment, but it was sweet and sweet smell at last. How did it happen when so many had tried but no one had succeeded? I can see several differences between Trump's approach and all the others, but let's let Victor Davis Hanson speak about it for just a moment. I'm paraphrasing Mr. Hanson. But for one thing, he said, Trump approaches negotiations from a position of strength rather than weakness. Remember the one hostage who said that when Trump was elected, they started treating them better, no more spitting on them, no more forcing them to dig their own graves because they were obviously afraid of him. Trump was very successful in cutting off the money supply to Hamas and other Iranian proxy terrorist armies. His sanctions on Iranian oil were squeezing the country's ability to make war and supply the proxy armies. His attack on the Iranian nuclear enrichment site destroyed, or at least set back, the Iranian efforts at building a nuclear weapon. That took away the threat that Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders had screamed about for 46 years. He supplied Israel with the weapons and the permission to attack and destroy the three Iranian proxy armies, Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah, were all reduced to ineffectiveness by the relentless Israeli attacks. The American attack on Iran demonstrated a military capability that was so incredible people on both sides had to take notice. Israel destroyed Iran's anti-air capability and embarrassed that nation before the world, which respects and understands only strength. He was clever enough to notice that there is now no great Arab or Palestinian leader such as Arafat to always hamstring negotiations. Instead, he assembled a coalition of Arab countries to act for the Arab/Palestinian cause. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, especially Qatar. These countries all have the ability, the money, the manpower to rebuild Gaza. Mr. Hansen makes sense, gives a little clarity to something very unclear, but there are some of my own observations. Trump's approach, in my opinion, was unclear to me, I guess to both sides. It finally came to the forefront when it had to. It was unclear at first, but when it had to, it became clear. You can say many things about that man, but if you're honest, you have to admit that he's quite a negotiator. And like a good trial lawyer, he knows negotiations have to be set up in advance. Strength has to be demonstrated in advance in order to achieve success. For his entire time in office, he has been building the appearance of a very strong country, second to none. He sent Pete Hegseth to publicly admonish the General Officer Corps and let the world know that he expected a warrior class to lead in the military. He used the carrot and stick approach in dealing with friend and foe alike. Who knows what passed in private conversations with Netanyahu? I've been very critical of his seeming control of Trump, which he publicly bragged about. When Netanyahu attacked Qatar, an American ally, attacked with American weapons, he was infuriated. Trump, that is, infuriated, humiliated. He didn't just let it pass. Bibi had to call from the Oval Office and say he regretted the decision. He calmed the fears of the Qataris by forming a mutual defense agreement with Qatar, pledging American support if they were attacked. He wouldn't have had to do that if Bibi was just a little more rational. When the Saudis expressed apprehension about Israel's nuclear weapons and apparently told him that every country in the Middle East was being held hostage by Israeli nukes, Bibi's irrationality, he took action to calm them. He arranged with an American blessing a deal between the Saudis and Pakistan, a nuclear-armed country, in which they pledged to come to each other's mutual support if attacked. So, the Saudis and the Pakistanis, a mutual defense treaty. Perhaps most importantly, he doesn't seem to hold grudges. He doesn't want to, quote, bring democracy to countries which have never had democracy and don't want it. He respects their culture, their traditions, and treats them accordingly. When he attacked Iran's nuclear sites, he said he now wants to make Iran great again. He holds out the carrot by offering a way for the nations of the Middle East to have prosperity if they have peace. And he tries to convince them to put aside thousands of years of generational hatred for prosperity, which comes through peace, not war. The leaders of the Middle East countries, because of the actions and attitudes I just mentioned, now see America differently. Whether completely true or not, they see America as the global leader in AI, robotics, crypto, other next-generation technologies, and therefore America and its chief executive need to be accommodated. To wrap up this section on how he did it, he left them with no alternative. There is no alternative except the bombed-out, starving rubble that is Gaza. There are a lot of crazy people over there, but apparently enough of them are sane to make some difference. The peace may be only temporary, or perhaps it will require more war to enforce it. But for that, just one day, at least one day, there was rejoicing. Both sides appeared to violate the agreement as soon as it was signed. The Israeli forces killed 5 Palestinians who approached their lines after signing. The Palestinians were told not to approach military positions, but it is unclear whether these 5 people were Hamas fighters or just starving Palestinians. The agreement requires Hamas to disarm and stop fighting. It does not permit Hamas to occupy and run Gaza. Somehow, in all the rubble, the Hamas units found new uniforms, which look clean. They look clean. They look like they're in good military-grade condition at this point. They have asserted control where Israeli units have pulled back. They have rounded up people said to have collaborated with the Israelis and publicly executed them by shooting them in the back of the head while they were being forced to kneel. The scene reminded me of all those black and white photos of the Nazis doing the same thing to Jews. Hamas, despite agreeing to disarm, seems to think it can reassert control over Gaza and continue stealing UN aid charging starving people for food. But Trump says if that's what they think, then they have another thing coming. Journalists in Gaza report that Hamas is moving rapidly to reassert control. Hamas has brought up on the people of Gaza nothing but brutality and death, but once again, they respect only strength and brute power. According to Reuters, they have killed more than 30 people in battles with rival forces after signing. I guess there's more than one group which would like to have control of that pile of rubble and all the world aid flowing in. The public executions of supposed collaborators is an obvious attempt to terrorize an obviously already terrorized civilian population. Trump was not amused by Hamas's refusal to abide by the agreement they signed, or at least a spokesman signed for them. Quote, well, they're going to disarm because they said they were going to disarm, and if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. I don't have to explain that to you, but if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games, okay? End quote. He went on to say that he spoke to Hamas and said, you're going to disarm, right? They said, yes, sir, we're going to disarm. That's what they told me. So they will disarm or we will disarm them. Got it? It's just as hard to predict how the war hawks here in America will respect the peace as it is Hamas. There appears to be nothing a good war hawk hates more than peace. Chief War Hawk Lindsey Graham said that Israel is planning another invasion of Gaza. Finally, folks, to that I say that Israel is a sovereign country and can do what it wants, but if it does anything to foul up this peace deal so painstakingly built, it will do it without American tax dollars, American equipment, American support. At least I hope so anyway. At least that's the way I see it, folks. Until next time, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.